and my output was the speakers.
Aha, yes.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for wasting so much
That's okay. Can you
time.
hear me now?
I can.
Yay! Yay! You look great.
Thank you. As you can see, I went for back of the icebox.
Yes, perfect. I was like,
But
oh, I went for obviously I'm not wearing boots and
Dean!
jeans. Jean. Yeah.
Oh. Or I guess maybe the look that you have, I mean, they're interchangeable, but the look that you have is maybe a little more Sam it.
Yeah, they are kind of interchangeable. Sam has like a tan jacket. Feel like
Oh, he
it's like his
does. He
iconic look.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Eva is also here.
Hi, Eva.
Hi,
So I
Eva.
have a little puppy with me, right? Who just had a bath
Yes.
and he's sleeping.
Oh,
So
oh,
like he
see.
has been crying. Yeah. So hopefully he'll just like stay. He's like, okay, I see where she is.
Mhm.
She's working,
Yep.
like she's on a call like dad. Um, that's what he spends 85% of his time doing at work, because that's what
Yeah.
happens when you're like a manager, is you spend your entire life in meetings.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, so
Yay. Yay.
now we
Also,
can do it.
we can do it. When I was setting up, I was like, "Oh, I know that, we've got all the fairy lights and stuff. That'll be a nice background." I didn't think about the um prominently placed bisexual flag, but also don't take it back.
Ooh. Oh, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. Like I told somebody on Tumblr, a lot of weird stars aligned so that all this would happen. Okay,
Yes.
so I guess we would say this is a very special episode of Monster Girls.
This is a very special episode of Monster Girls. Yes. A
Yay!
Black Friday episode of Monster Girls.
Yay, a Bleak
Um,
Friday episode of Monster
yeah.
Girl. A black and red Friday of Monster Girls.
Yes. Yes, the 2020th of Monster Girls.
Mhm.
I'm Anthea,
And I'm Elisa.
and today we're going to talk about Supernatural.
Yes. And
Uh,
Elisa, your best friend from the back of the icebox.
yeah. We're qualified to talk about this because I watched Supernatural as it was airing for seasons like
Okay.
4 and 5, I think. Except then I
Yeah.
quit halfway through season 5. I rage quit. So that's how qualified I am to talk about Supernatural.
I quit. Gosh. It must have been around there. So did you get to, was that the end of season 4 when Ruby did her reveal of that she had been working with Azazel the whole time?
Oh God, I think so. That sounds right. I don't know.
It was a twist that simultaneously was stupid and made the character of Ruby 10,000 times more interesting.
Yeah, yes.
And then she died, I think,
Yeah, definitely. I
like
mean,
immediately.
I'm assuming. What
Yeah,
was it Genevieve Ruby at that point?
it was. I
Okay.
loved Blonde Ruby. I don't remember her
I
name.
did
She
like
was such a
Blonde
great
Ruby.
little actress.
Yeah, she was.
Which is a condescending way of putting it, which I guess launched this into like, so okay, what are your
Okay.
framing thoughts here?
Oh my God. Well, I'm gonna say that you are qualified to talk about Supernatural because you just wrote a newly viral poem about Destiel being canonized or not.
Is it
Uh,
okay? I will take a second to talk about, okay,
please, please,
mistranslated here.
please.
Okay. Hello. I am, you might think, looking at me, what is she going for? Is she native? What's she trying to do? I am Latina, which is native in a way, the way that like squares are rectangles.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really I like this jewelry. It's beautiful, native
Yes.
craftsmanship.
I
Um,
am wearing the native earrings that you got me for my birthday. The native.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so those folks are, oh God, what's the name? Something City, Black City, Dodge City, something. I don't know. God,
We'll look it
and I
up.
wish I could remember. I wish I could also remember the name of the designer who made these, but I don't. So
Oh
I'm
man.
we all need to do better.
Yeah.
Anyway, Because I am Latina, I have written a series of poetry I call Mistranslated, which is basically English and Spanish poems that look structurally similar. They have a lot of words that are either the same or look like they could be the same, but actually they are translated wrong. So they create a meaning in Spanish, a meaning in English, and a meaning that arises from the disconnect between the two.
Yeah.
So when I found out from my Tumblr dash that the Spanish dub of Supernatural had something that could be read like that could be read as a return of Castiel's love confession for Dean,
which is pretty unambiguously a love confession in Spanish, right? He says te amo.
In Spanish, it's unambiguously a love confession. It's just the confirmation that may or may not
right. Well,
be that.
I say this because, you know, I think that the fig leaf that the producers have left themselves in English is I love you, Dean, could be I love you as a best friend, I love you as a brother.
Yeah. Do you love me as a pen pal? To quote the sadly still relevant In and Out.
Yes.
No, Billy, I love you. My leg. Yeah, no. So like
dub.
in Spanish, they do this amazing thing for you, just like the ancient Greeks once did, with Eros and Agape, and the other one. They have like querer, which is like the one that you use for your buddies, and then amar, which is the one that you use for your buddies' benefits. You love buddies.
Yeah.
Your heart friends. I mean,
your heart friends. Oh, that's cute. No, I like that.
And that's the one that Castiel uses in Spanish. And then Dean says yo a ti cas, which at the very least is not like, there's a scene early in Mad Men when one of Joan's girlfriends is confessing that she's a lesbian and is in love with her.
Yes.
And Joan just like stares straight ahead and is like, let's go out tonight.
Oh,
and it's very much like, nope, I'm not hearing this. This isn't happening. And I think you can read some of that into don't do this, Cass. Like,
yes.
Which is in the English, the English language version.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least in the Spanish dub, saying I love you too is a way of saying like, I see and hear and accept these feelings and I care deeply for you.
Right.
Which is not the Dean Winchester that we knew back in season 5.
Nope.
Yes. And at most could be considered a yeah, man, me too.
Yeah, reciprocation.
Like, we both love each other the same way. Yeah. So it's one of those two things.
Right. And either way, it's more, like you said, it's more emotional vulnerability than English Dean Winchester.
Exactly.
What's the word I'm looking for? Expresses. There we go. Evinces. Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, and so with that being the case, all of this like lead up and stuff, this is we talk so much. But I thought I have to write about this. Like, I have to write something mistranslated about it.
Yeah.
And so the English side is kind of like, it's a little bit Spanish dub, English dub, you know, Spanish dub on the Spanish side, English dub on the English side. But it's also a little bit like, sort of like the Dean that maybe the writers and the production team or the people in charge of what Supernatural is as a property and as a product. Like the English might be more that, and the Spanish is kind of about my relationship with Supernatural, which I think actually kind of segues into where we want to go.
Yes, please.
Because I remember that that I made a list. Now, I didn't actually go through my live journal stuff about my live journal commentary about Supernatural.
Yes.
Before this, I meant to, and I didn't. But I remember like having compiled at one point, I think it was at the end of season 2. Because I heard Ava comes back.
Yes.
Womp womp. But I remember making a list, and it might have been end of season 3 even, of the
Mhm.
number of episodes that that female characters had,
Mhm.
like, that they were in.
Mhm.
And I think at 2 episodes at the time, whether it was season 2 or season 3, I don't remember, but Ava was in the top 10 longest lived recurring female characters on Supernatural
With 2 episodes.
at 2 episodes.
Yep, sounds right. Yeah, because Joe and Ellen had been introduced at that point,
They had.
and Joe had been in 2 or 3 episodes, I think.
Yep. Jess
Ellen,
and Mary Winchester were in on a technicality because
right,
because Jess shows up in one episode and then is dead, and so she comes back all the time, but she's dead.
right.
And Mary
Yes.
starts dead and stays dead.
Mary starts dead and stays dead, but she comes back as a ghost a few times. Yeah,
She does
yeah,
indeed.
yep. Um, yeah. Oof, oof. Yeah,
Yeah, and I was counting longest lived by, like, most recurring, so I think,
sure,
yeah, it was, like, Mary Winchester.
sure. Right, because there's a non-zero number of women who in the first few seasons who who are guests of the week, who are damsels of the week, and who survive at the end,
Right.
but then are never seen again.
She
Like,
probably killed
and she
herself.
probably killed herself. Oh no.
Supernatural is trash.
Yeah, basically though. Or ultimately, as it turns out, they get brought back for one episode to be killed off much later in the show. That
Right.
So Elisa sent me this you were looking up, you were trying to find how many women died on Supernatural, and it's for the poem, and
It
you
was.
sent me this as you know, Bob, you sent me this article about where someone was talking about, like, um I think specifically she was responding to Charlie's death, to Felicia Day's death, and was like, I'm so, like, I love Supernatural, but we can't pretend this is not a systemic problem anymore. And then did just like a character by character, like, here's a character, here's what she did, here's how cool she was, and then this is how she died. um and that was, I mean, and that was one of those things where I was like, oh, again, I knew it was bad, but it's
Right.
so bad.
Right. Right. No, right. Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, they had a deaf hunter?" Oh,
Right. Oh, oops.
yep,
Yeah.
of course you did.
Yeah.
"Oh, Kevin and his mom both died? Oh,
Oh, I'm
yeah, that
shocked.
they did."
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
of
even
course,
Kevin's girlfriend died as well after being
right.
possessed.
And this is, I also think that this is something that we talk a lot um about women dying on Supernatural, as we should, but I think that there is also something really pernicious about the number of times women's bodies aren't their own, that women are
Mm.
possessed before they die.
Mhm.
Like, it seems like more than a handful of those women
Mhm.
would get brought back to, they were brought back as ghosts or visions to torment Sam or Dean.
Mhm.
They're brought back and they are possessed to torment Sam or and Dean, and then they're killed. And it's okay, like, at that point it's okay to kill them because it's not really them anymore, Dean. And like, and they're the monster at that point, which is something that explicitly comes up multiple times in the show, that, like, you have to kill monsters no
Mhm.
matter what.
Yes,
um
yes, that's also really important because for when we talk about white guy cosmology,
mhm.
that I think that also plays a really big role.
Yes, yeah, yes, tell me more. Like,
Um, well, one thing that always annoyed me, and I guess Lenore would be the one exception as far as I know, or maybe there's a
the
handful of other exceptions.
vampire.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Benny also later, from what I understand,
Oh, right,
is a bit of
yes.
an exception. There are occasional exceptions to this rule. They are usually men, not always, because I think also the cool witch, Patrick,
Who? Okay, sure.
there's a cool witch at one point, like, and he's
Sure.
cool. And like the
That
trickster
seems right.
is, I mean, he's technically an angel, so like he's
Right.
fine. Like,
Right.
and there's all these like little mini exceptions that come up.
Mhm.
But I think, but there's always like something, I mean, okay. But for the most part, when someone is a monster, they can literally never cope with it.
Mhm.
And I just,
Yes.
okay, I said literally, and yet after naming some exceptions, but like this is a season that's like old enough for its learner's permit. So like,
Oh yeah. Yes.
or this is a
Yes.
show. So like, let's just say, the fact that I know of, a handful is like, all right, but the mass of stories is like, because
Yeah.
you've got Heart with Madison, where she turns into a werewolf, and there's literally no dealing with it. She has to be killed, and in fact, I believe asks to be killed.
Yep. Yep.
Later, there's another character. That's a fun theme too, of women characters like making it easy on Sam and Dean by laying it out for them about why they have to kill them, and they're still good people.
Mhm.
And in fact, better people for killing them.
Yes.
Ooh. Um,
In fact, this is the
there's
moral choice.
there's Ruby, who makes a big deal out of saying like, I remember what it's like to be human, and all the other ones forget. And that was just kind of a thing that she made up to get close to
Yeah.
17, which
Yeah.
was a great lie, except that like it would have been interesting if it were true in a sense, because then it would sort of say something about, then there's the Rougarou, the guy who has an urge to eat human flesh, and he's done. There's all of these diseases and like sort of supernatural diseases and madnesses and monsterizations that once they take hold, there's nothing to be done except to kill the person.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Demonic possession is the exception, but even that can prove to be irrevocable, because a lot of times demons are pretty hard on their human hosts,
Mhm.
and so they will injure them so badly during the course of possession that they die anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not quite the
Yes.
same thing as corrupted on the inside, so you got to kill them, but
Right. Yes. Yes. Irredeemably
Mhm.
monstrous.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
very, very few monsters throughout the series. I think again, there's like a witch who happens to be the only male witch that I know of, is like one who's like kind of cool and is permitted to live, as opposed to all those other bitches. I mean, why witches, who
Mhm.
made deals with devils just like him, but they are mean and bad and do hex bags, so
Yep.
they gotta die.
Yep.
I think
Can't have
Patrick
them
made some as
around.
well. Like, I mean, he's a witch. It's just that
Sure.
he's a he.
Right. Yes. Well, when you mentioned like when you mentioned Gabriel, like, the trickster is
Right.
the
And
monster, but he's
Gabriel.
an angel and he is okay.
Right.
I feel like all the show, okay, and I'm kind of speculating because I think that this mostly happened after I stopped watching, but it seems like the show doesn't necessarily draw a hard line between monsters and angels either.
I
Like,
think they start off doing that, but then it gets into this angels are assholes thing. And then there's like some
exactly.
internecine warfare, and then the angels are killing each other, and the angels are terrible. So it's like,
Right.
then it does become functionally what's the difference?
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah. There are a
like,
handful of gods who don't matter, who are, you know,
yep. Yeah.
or there are pagan gods, which somehow the pagan gods are different from non-Christian gods,
Right.
but they have this weird Christian-centric thing where the pagan gods are bloodier and worse, and so they're effectively monsters.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
there's definitely that. So yeah, so all of that is to say that like that's a big part of
Mhm.
Supernatural, which is, with a handful of heavily justified exceptions,
Mhm. Yep.
there aren't monsters that like they interact with who like give them tips about stuff, or like who know like, this is not Buffy, this is not Dresden Files, this is
Right.
like,
Right, right. And it's weird because, we definitely have in the first couple of seasons this idea that Sam is potentially a monster. That
right.
Sam, that when John Winchester dies, one of the last things he tells Dean is like, you might have to kill Sam if he goes bad. And there's this
You
whole,
think I'm gonna go dark side?
and it's like this great, you know, question about like, are all of the monsters that you meet actually monsters? Can, like,
Right.
they set up this interesting question and then they go, nah.
Exactly.
No, not really though.
That's so fucking frustrating. And
Well,
like
and I
Sam is like one of the only like he is one of the only people who's like I mean the special kids. He's one
mhm,
of it's sort of implied that the special kids I mean I think it's not implied. It's like it's out there that the special kids can be fine with the powers that they have as long as they don't it's like using the one ring. As long as you don't
yeah,
use them too often
right.
and definitely as long as you don't do anything to make them stronger. Like we don't get any they hadn't added the story element of demon blood so by the end
Mhm,
of season 2 in Cold Oak, Jake and Ava don't talk about getting stronger by
mhm.
drinking demon blood or consuming demon blood. They talk about just flexing the muscles,
Yeah. Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
and like giving into it. And so Sam has this huge addiction storyline
Mhm.
about that. And he just barely makes it out because he's the specialist boy alive
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
dead and then alive and then dead and then alive, but then dead again, but then alive.
Yes, yeah. As the revolving door of supernatural death. Shoot,
Well,
I
for
feel
some
like
people,
that
it's a revolving door, and for some people, it just gets
just gets, yeah, you're trying to and people are like, "No, it's pull." And you're like, "I don't think it is. I think
Ash
it's
and the
welded
Harville
shut."
stuck behind there, like, oh.
God! Yeah, I quit watching when the Harvells died. I told you this before, but for
Yes,
our
please do. I
listening audience, I quit watching when the Harvells died. And it was not per se because the Harvells died. Uh, it was because I thought that the show, it was mid season 5. It was the season 5 mid season finale. And I think that they like it ends on a cliffhanger where they raise where like Lucifer comes back or something. I don't know. There's some big bad. I just remember a shot of everybody like looking up at this thing coming up out of the ground and everyone was like, "Oh shit." And then that was the end of the and then they were like, "We're on hiatus. Come back in January." Um but Joe and Ellen or Joe gets torn apart by hellhounds, and then Ellen holds her in her arms and sets off an explosion to kill all the hellhounds to give Sam and Dean and Cass, I guess, at that point, probably Bobby. I don't know, Team Scooby, a chance to go ahead. And everything up to this point had been like, this is the apocalypse for real this time. We mean it. This is the apocalypse. We didn't, that other time with the cult, that was a warm up. This is the real apocalypse. Lilith is coming, blah blah, blah, seals are opening, all that. So I was like, okay, season 5, they're going out with a bang. They're going to stop the apocalypse. 5 seasons is a great way to wrap up a show, awesome. uh and oh, they're killing off everybody on the way to the apocalypse, because I understand how the hero, I was in college, I was studying lit, I was like, great, yeah, hero's journey, you have to take away everybody so that the heroes are left with nothing but themselves. And they're going to, and but they find that inner strength and they face down the darkness, they hit their darkest hour and they come out victorious. Cool. Okay. Very sad about my faves dying and all that, but at least there's a narrative reason for it, right? And then they announced that they'd been renewed for season 6, and I realized that that was not what was happening. The Harvells were just dead, and I quit. I was
yep.
so mad. And then people were like, "Oh, Anthea, you should come back and watch again because the Harvells come back." And I was like, "Okay." And I found out later and I did not go back. So it's like, I don't, like, are they back? Back? And nobody would tell me. And I was like, "So I don't think they are. I don't think they're back the way Sam and Dean get to come back all the time. I don't think they're back the way Bobby gets to come back. They must just show up in the show." And that was correct. They show up in crapsack heaven, where it turns out that heaven is a shit show and it actually sucks to be there. And why am I happy to see them there if they're
Right.
not
Like,
like cool?
and I want to also let's also know, Elisa, you should come back to Supernatural. There's this really cool lesbian character, and it's It's, oh my God, what's her name? Felicia Day.
Felicia
Yeah.
Day. It's
It's
Felicia
Felicia
Day.
Day.
Everybody's geeky favorite. Like,
Everybody's geeky fave back at that time. And
mhm.
she has it in her, she's not going to die. She's not going to die. She has it in her contract that she's not going to die, which is by itself a red flag.
Yeah.
And also, like, I mean, there's Kevin and Mrs. Tran. Oh my God, Elisa, you got to come back because there's these cool characters of color and they're not dying and they've changed.
Come on, baby. Come on back. I've changed.
And
But
I
I
was like,
always used protection.
and
I always had a gun.
you never wore a condom, but I always had a gun. I would also, for the record, I would like a meme of Dean that has that.
Yeah, that
Works
feels
for
right.
Sam too, honestly.
Yeah.
Like Sam like would be more like likely to wear a condom, but I would
Yeah.
believe that he might be like, but I always had a gun.
Yeah, yes. Didn't Dean apparently like accidentally father a Renesmee child who grew up in 3 days and then he had to kill her? Then Sam killed her? That was also in that article that you sent me.
That did happen. That
What?
allegedly happened.
What? What are you doing? Sorry, you were making a point about
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes.
about
Okay.
come back, baby. It'll be different this time.
Yeah. So weirdly, I feel like it's something about being a teenager, something about being in Texas, like does in some ways prevent you from developing a racial consciousness if you
Sure.
are a white passing person who, doesn't always get treated
Mm-hmm.
like garbage.
Yeah.
In college, I think I had like my start of a dawning like racial consciousness, like this is my heritage, this is where I come from, this has shaped my worldview because now I'm in college and I see that I see things differently than other people.
Sure.
And there was something of, I think, a classic liberal person of color, like, oh hell no, like, I'm not coming back. You betray me. Betraying me once means, and I come back means, you can get away with it. You're going to do it 27 more times.
Yep.
Just like white people. And
Yep.
sure enough, Supernatural was a 15-year-long football that you kept running at and they pulled it away from you.
Every time. Every goddamn time.
Every single time.
And that was what got me about when I finally when I saw everybody freaking out about the finale, and and the more I still haven't watched, I am not planning on watching the entire final episode. But the more clips that I saw and the more that I heard about it, the more I was like, you truly did go back to where you were in season 1. Like, time is a flat circle in this episode, in this show, and that boggles my mind. And it sounds like that is something that really that's part of the frustration that a lot of fans who have stuck with it for 15 years are feeling. I mean,
I can't imagine.
right.
I mean, so many people told me, for the record, a bunch of people told me either in tags or sometimes they told me directly,
Mm-hmm.
In the past couple of days, like, this made me cry. Like, this poem made me cry. And I replied back to somebody who DM'd me
Mm-hmm.
and was like, you know what? I stopped watching this show in season 5, and hearing about all of this stuff brought up a lot of feelings I didn't know were still there. So if you're crying, man, like, this is a good time to cry. Like, It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. No,
Because,
totally.
like, and I don't want to, for the record, I also want to posit that, like, I mean, yes, there are also a couple of things that happened in my life such that, like, I had a number of very bad experiences with men at the end of college and then the year after,
Mm-hmm.
and they were sufficiently bad that I was just like, I mean, they weren't like, but they were just like, mostly normal interaction with people that are toxic or that are unhealthy bad.
Sure.
Not entirely, for the most part. And they were sufficiently bad for me. And these are people who say they're my friends, who say that they like me, like all this stuff. And so I decided, I remember that one time this was like the year I graduated, I believe. I was sharing a bed with a young man who had built a wall of pillows to prevent me from touching him. And I just remember staring at that wall of pillows and thinking, I deserve better than this. And that was when I stopped letting men treat me like crap, kind of basically for the rest of my life. when I was 22, so it's been a decade.
Yeah.
It's been pretty good. It's been a lot better than before I started doing that. And that's also coincidentally, make up your own mind. I'll lay out the facts. You can make up your own mind. That is when I
Yes.
stopped watching Supernatural.
Interesting. Interesting.
Interesting. But here's the deal. So I don't blame people. Like, I'm not saying like I'm laying these out to be like, these are some factors that happened in my life, like dawning racial consciousness, dawning cultural consciousness, just running up against so many shitty dudes within such a short span of time who were all telling me that they were something other than what they were. That I was like, great. And also, just as a byproduct, I don't really need to watch this show anymore.
Right.
I'll find something different. I never started watching Girls, also, which would have been a natural landing pad for me in some ways as a young hipster, as a millennial hipster in San Francisco.
Right. Yes.
But I say it because like there are, and we've seen this for years. These arguments have been made for over a decade now within the fandom. So within like an AFAB space, basically, like a lot of people socialized as women who have common experiences, because a lot of them are white, not all of them, but a lot of them, but not all of them are within a certain age range. So we have a lot of common experiences. A lot of them are in other fandoms, which definitely helps. Also to kind of have commonalities, common language. And there are a couple of things that go on with Supernatural, like on the screen and off the screen, that I think are like, so number one, there are a lot of badass women.
Yes.
There are cool women. There are cool character types. Missouri Mosley, like, is a very cool character type. Cassie, who shows up for sadly only one episode, she's a journalist. She's a Black journalist in like a world full of like creepy, like she's a young, cool Black journalist in this world full of monsters and racist trucks. Racist truck ghosts. And that's like very interesting. There's
a lot of single mothers, I feel like.
A lot of single mothers.
Tough and self-sufficient.
There's Ellen and Joe, who are the tough and self-sufficient. And Ellen is a small business owner and like runs this like incredibly cool business that if it were a Dresden Files, a book series that's not like Sunshine and Rainbows, because I'll get to that, but like if it were another Dresden Files, the Roadhouse or some incarnation thereof, even if they had to move a bunch of times, like the Leverage Gang, it would have been like this hub for a lot of new characters and plot development and a safe place to like talk things out, like how are we going to defeat the evil and like all that stuff, which it was briefly.
Before it got burned down.
Yep, you've got that. You've got cool
killing
villains.
Ash off screen. Sorry.
Yep.
Not that I'm bitter. Yes. Cool anti-heroes.
Cool anti-heroes like Ruby at first and Bella. You've got Mrs. Tran, who is like an older woman who's super cool. You got Charlie, like all of this. There's all these cool characters, and a lot of them are not really characters that we've seen. And a lot of them are not characters, especially at the time that Supernatural was airing, they were not really characters that we saw in horror.
Yes.
There were, and I think, the dawn of streaming means that like I had heard of like blaxploitation films where you do get characters like that, where you get a Sugar Hill, where Sugar makes a deal and kills her enemies with voodoo and then walks away totally unscathed.
God, we do gotta watch that.
We have to. It's so good. And there's Ganja and Hess, which is I still haven't seen, but it's like a sensitive classic. Like, and these are films from the 70s. But the distribution made it such that when I had heard of blaxploitation, I had heard that it was racist. And I hadn't kind of heard some of the competing, ideas about it that like, okay, but like it's like representation and we got more control of storylines and because it wasn't being sold to a white audience, it was being sold to a Black audience, and all these other deals, and like that I think in Blackula that like just some of the there's like this shot of like the slow motion shot of like this vampire woman like running down the hallway, And we saw that in Horror Noir, and
Yeah. It
it
was, like,
was
groundbreaking, right?
it was groundbreaking, yes, and it was chilling. Years
Yes.
later, it holds up because it was so beautifully done, and so, like, on a shoestring, people just making these miracles, you know?
Yes.
But we couldn't see those because the distribution wasn't really in place for that to be the case.
Right.
Um, and so I feel like, a Black woman in horror, Cassie in Missouri might have been, like, the first women that I saw in that
Mhm.
capacity, and so
Mhm.
that was really important to me.
Yeah.
Now, they never discovered Latinas, so I don't think they did. I don't think they ever managed to discover.
I've
Did
seen
they ever
some.
discover Native people? Did they find Native people at any
Well,
point?
okay, so there is a Wendigo in episode 2.
Oh, you
I
mean the
mean,
all-white Wendigo episode?
yes.
Bold choice, Cotton.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. Yeah, no, that might obviously there's 15 seasons, that's like 300 episodes. I am not entirely willing to stake my life on there never being. I know that there's some like telenovela stuff, so I'm not 100%. Maybe I'm making that up. I just keep seeing gifs of Dean being like, "Why don't you say that to me in Spanish?" Um, so I think like,
Right.
but to your
There's
point, like,
some novella stuff. Anyway, yes.
but that's not really that doesn't fix the issue that you're bringing up, which is that no matter, and this is again the white guy cosmology thing that we've
Yes, we
been
have to go
talking
back to
about
that for the record,
is
but
we have to go back.
I have two
Um,
things on my notes. Okay.
okay, is that thing that I was saying about like or that I was saying to you the other day about the like the the faux woke white liberal thing of like, we're so happy to have you on board. We're not going to let you make any decisions, but we really appreciate having your voice in the room. Um,
Yeah, there's a seat at the table. You're tied to it
yeah, yes.
and gagged, but it is there.
Yeah, but you're at the table. Hey, you're so brave. Um, and I bring this up because like just because there may be some jokes about telenovelas doesn't I still can't name any Latina characters that ever showed up. I don't know about them. There's no angels that I know of that were played by Hispanic actors. I don't know of any storylines that involved native representation of any kind except this one that in retrospect is pretty problematic. Like,
Well,
oh
I mean, I
boy.
don't necessarily I would even say like I think that well, okay. So I would but I will
Yes.
so that having been said, like yeah, they never discovered Latinas and they never I mean, as far as I know, like up to season 5 they had not discovered
Hmm.
indigenous people.
Yeah.
Um uh but there was representation that was at the time on a show on a major network that had a big fandom that really wasn't in other places, and that isn't
Hmm.
nothing. And I think as a woman watching, I mean, and even just women getting to do cool stuff,
Yeah.
like Bella, who's that cat burglar who outwits them, and like gets cool scenes with guns and like all that stuff, like
Yeah.
and Ruby, who has a demon killing knife, which was kind of like, which if she had been in a tabletop campaign, we would have been like, well, that's broken, in a great way, right?
Yeah,
Like in a
yeah,
great way.
yeah, way to ruin the encounters, Ruby.
Exactly. Um, so we got to see them like being really cool, like and there is a little bit of that like syndrome where the first time they're introduced, they're the coolest they'll ever be, and then they get less cool from there.
Mhm.
But again, at least, but I want to validate people who saw things that really empowered them
Totally.
about supernatural. So that's step
Totally.
one. And the end of the first thought that's on my nose, because
Okay.
the second one is just remember white guy cosmology, because we
White
got to
guy's
explain it.
cosmology, yeah.
Um, uh, the second thing is that behind the scenes, you know, I, out of the realm of the show, the production team was convinced that they were doing this great thing for women empowerment and representation. Before I had seen an episode of Supernatural, I actually was at Comic-Con in San Diego in 2007. Um, the year that Joss Whedon hit on me. And I was 18 years old. And my friend dragged me to the Supernatural panel because she had seen the first season, and I was fine going. And the team talked about, sadly, in comments that aged poorly, they were like, "Oh, you guys are gonna love these characters that we've got. We've got Ruby. She's like this mysterious like demon, and she's got like a knife. And Bella, she's cool. She's a cat burglar." And they were just clearly very excited about these female characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they thought they were doing a great thing.
Sure.
And I think they have continued to be like, yeah, we're pushing the envelope. We're going to have a lesbian, and we're going to have a deaf female hunter, and we're going to have all this stuff. But none of that matters ultimately. Like, it's okay, baby steps. But those baby steps, it very quickly stopped being enough for these characters to just show up. Because there's only so much you can do with a single fucking episode.
Right.
The longer the show goes, the more ground that characters have to make up to get something near the character development, or at least the time in people's living rooms, that Dean, Pam, Bobby, Castiel have. And I think it gets, as other shows caught up and surpassed Supernatural very quickly. By 20 the mid 20 teens, as streaming services caught up, the horror genre the popular horror genre online outstripped those guys easy. I don't remember what year The Invitation came out, but that one's not Supernatural at all, so that's a terrible example. But just like women of color in front of the frame, behind the frame, people like talking about people talking about sexism.
Didn't Karen Kusama do Jennifer's Body?
Karen Kusama, I believe, did, yes. Okay. Because I was like, it's like you've been looking out for me all my life.
Yeah.
You're right. Yes. I just love Karen Kusama, so I guess that's it. But who doesn't? Everyone does. And so but also that being the shifting landscape around Supernatural that I was much more a part of than I was part of Supernatural at that point. We both bounced pretty hard into the Soska sisters. And because you know what? Thanks to Supernatural, I met Catherine Isabel.
Right.
Ava, the manic pixie demon girl.
Yes.
Of my dreams.
Yes.
And I followed her into, back in time into Ginger Snaps.
Right.
And then forward into American Mary.
And thence to NBC Hannibal.
Yep.
NBC Hannibal, NBC Hannibal, I think, is an interesting, in the same way that that Supernatural has a lot of X-Files in its DNA. I think so. A few years back, I saw, this is, sorry to tangent, but
no, you should go, because I've just been talking. Go.
I saw somebody making some joke about Supernatural being the granddaddy monster of the week series, and I didn't even start watching X-Files until 2013, long after it was off the air, and even I was like, excuse you, Supernatural didn't invent shit. Supernatural is and again, this is not necessarily a slam on it, I'm a highly derivative artist, but Supernatural is a mashup of American Gods and the X-Files. Two great tastes that taste great together. We're well done. Anyway, point being, I think that NBC Hannibal is kind of a monster of the week show for the first season.
Yes, only the monsters are all serial killers.
The monsters are all serial killers, but it's living in this weird, hyper, or not supernatural, but definitely a couple sigmas heightened. There we go. I was like, hyper real. That's not what I'm trying to say. Heightened
operatic.
Yes, melodramatic.
Yeah. Horror
fantastical. Yeah. Gothic. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, there we go. All those great things.
All those adjectives.
Yes. So all of that is to say that so these are the cultural things that are sort of so I got into the Soska sisters. And then they're into more obscure people of color and LGBT haunted spheres of horror.
Yes.
And I think even though, maybe not everybody was like as obsessive indie horror fan
Right.
as us, like I think that the culture was moving there kind of past supernatural in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
But to come back to the point, and then to jump a little bit into my next one, and I'll
Yeah.
actually fucking open up the floor for it. But
Okay.
I wanted to get, I mean, there's so much to get through. There's so much to get through. Even though we
Mhm.
only watched a third of this show, it's like that's 5 years.
Right. Yes. Yes.
That's
It was.
5 years of stuff.
It's a chunk. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a chunk.
Yeah. And they're long seasons too.
But nobody is stupid for thinking that, like, for thinking that the show is doing creatively what it believes it's doing creatively, or what it says it's doing creatively.
Right.
And I don't think that any of those fucking people, honestly, like even Sarah Gamble, who has apparently made some weird similar choices regarding buried gays multiple times,
Hmm.
um, or any of them, I don't think any of them have ever intended to be discriminatory or do a dog
No.
whistle or like anything like that. I think it's purely an accident because they're stupid and bad at writing and narrative. Really it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's basically it. And it's two things. One is systemically in our society, you have to work really hard to cast equitably and to create equitable storylines. And
Hmm.
you're swimming against the current.
Yes.
People, I mean, I think people think that it is easy, but it's like, just to take an example that you know very well, if you want to cast a native actor, so number one, we got to work on what kind of storyline is this native actor going to have.
Hmm.
Is it, how is it written? Is it
Hmm.
sensitive? So you need sensitivity reader. Well, the sensitivity reader is probably pretty busy because, the pool of native talent is very small. Growing, thank God,
But comparatively speaking, yeah.
yeah, but comparatively speaking, it's small. So you're gonna have to find that person well in advance of when you're going to be doing the rest of your script stuff, because if you
Hmm.
need to do revisions, you're gonna need to do those, get those in,
I can't
all that.
believe this is a situation that I have personally been involved with twice now.
I was gonna say multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why I bring up this one specifically,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if you're going to be telling American supernatural stories, it makes sense to have indigenous to America characters. So
Hmm.
that's why I'm using it, and also because I know that like you have seen how
Lived
difficult this can
experience.
be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So let's say you do all that. Oh, OC, don't cry, buddy.
Hi.
Now, yeah.
Hi, OC. Not you.
Now you need to cast your native actor. You have
Hmm.
to do the exact same thing because the native actors are busy.
Hmm.
And so like structurally, this is creating something where we have to build in at least an extra month of production time, just because you want to tell a slightly different kind of story, because that's structurally where things are at.
Hmm.
So that's step one, is like just because I think that people who haven't been part of these, I think his dad is home. And so
Oh, okay.
he's like, Dad, come talk to me.
Yeah.
Okay, he lay back down. Oh, okay. But I think that people who haven't been through it will think like, well, how hard can it possibly be? And it's like, but there are reasons that people make these shitty decisions. There
Yes.
are real reasons that have to do with time and people's pay and
Hmm.
like legal stuff and shit like that.
No,
They're
it's
shitty and they're garbage and we need to fix them, but
right.
you need
Well,
to know
and
what they are, or
they
else you'll run right
are
into them.
they are unfortunately self-perpetuating. Like systems and structures that have been set up for so long that overcoming them even once requires a lot of time and effort and money. Um, and so because overcoming them even once is so difficult, it is easier to just not do it, and then that just perpetuates I'm also thinking about like casting, or like working with deaf artists and the deaf community, and the amount of resources it takes to do that in an equitable, accessible way is so high. To do it well and to do it right, um it costs so much money to get interpreters because they are providing a very skilled specific service that a lot of people just won't do it. They just won't do it. And then all of the deaf artists who want to get work and want to get experience can't. And then when you go to cast, you're like, there's no deaf artists with the level of experience that I need for this. So I guess I'm just gonna have to cast a hearing artist who kind of signs, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, to your point,
Yes.
it's the you can have the best intentions and still not land it. Still not stick the landing. Um
Right.
and yeah, it's so much easier to just keep they're pretty white boys are a dime a dozen in LA and Vancouver. Like
They are, and they're talented. They
they
don't.
are. It's not and again, it's not a slam on the white actors involved in Supernatural or the like it's not their fault. They're good.
They're good. They seem wonderful. A lot of them. I
Mhm.
don't know about Jared. He's kind of a cryptid to me. But like
Yeah, he's
the
been
other
kind
ones
of
seem
shitty
seem great.
to like customer service people. That's what I
Oh,
know about
oh,
him.
all
I
right,
know, right? Yeah. Anyway.
all right. Well, but sever his head from his shoulders, I guess.
Devour
Okay, but so there's a second structural thing, and
him. Mhm.
I'm gonna mute myself immediately after this because
Okay.
God, one sec.
I'm trying to I can trying to think about like what else I want to say. I'm assuming you're about to start talking about white guy cosmology and I'm very interested in that. Um
Right. Okay. Because so
ah,
here is the
give me a prompt.
here's the secondary structural thing.
Yeah.
Structural thing.
Oh my god. Oh my god, and he's just lying there crying.
He was sitting up, but
Oh. Oh, see. Oh,
yes.
see.
Sophie says he cries like somebody self-soothing with a bucket of ice cream.
Yes.
And
Wow,
he
hi.
really does.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile,
Okay.
this dragon
So
monster. Hi.
but I'll just try and say this quickly, I guess, is
Okay.
that can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Oh, you're frozen. Oh,
Oh.
Jesus Christ, also.
Oh my god.
Huh? Oh, okay.
As the dog on this end slowly crawls further and further into my lap and makes herself the center of attention. Like I haven't been petting you for the past hour, just constantly. You piece of garbage. Yeah? Yeah? What do you have to say for yourself?
Can we take a quick pause,
Sure,
perhaps?
yes.
So I can take this dog outside. Okay, because nobody else
Absolutely.
wants to take him out. All right, great.
Resume recording. All right, we're back.
Yay. All right. So we addressed the structural stuff like that goes on behind the scenes that makes Supernatural like that can contribute to any creative project and probably almost certainly definitely Supernatural to becoming, more more like less anything that deviates from white guys
Mhm.
in LA and Vancouver. I think the structural issue that is diegetic
Mhm.
or sort of diegetic. It's kind of hard to tell, but
Yes.
the issue that is baked into the narrative and into the scripts that the creative team does have control over is the white guy cosmology of
Yes.
Supernatural.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the best way I can say to boil it down, and then I would welcome love your thoughts on this, is that Sam and Dean are the literal, as you said, and in another conversation we had about this, are the literal actual center of the universe.
Mhm.
They are the only ones who can change and bring change.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Their choices have weight and consequence and nobody else's do.
Mhm.
And they are also of central emotional importance. Perhaps for that reason, but also like for other reasons as well. They are of central emotional and spiritual importance to other characters.
Yes, and literally to the universe because they are the intended vessels of the Archangel Michael and the fallen angel Lucifer. Like, yeah, it's so this is something we talk about at work sometimes when we're world building, is we call it the Skywalker problem, which
Mm.
is the way that in Star Wars ultimately everything revolves around the Skywalkers, even when you try and expand the universe out in some way, like uh even in the new trilogy, it ultimately turns out that everything has to come back to Anakin's line. Um and and in Supernatural, it's the Winchester problem. Like, and I feel like sometimes the show lampshades it. Again, they go out of their way to be like, all right, Sam and Dean are literally the chosen vessels, or the intended vessels of the two entities that are going to bring about the end of the world, the biblical Armageddon. And
Right.
they're like, isn't it crazy that everything is about you? There's a whole series of books written about you by God. Like, so they sort of lampshade it, but then
That's so true. God writes fan fiction about them.
God writes fan fiction about them. Oh, right. Also, yes, one of the things we were talking about in terms of white guy cosmology is that God in Supernatural is literally explicitly a mediocre white guy.
Yep.
And in a lot of ways, that is one of those things that makes me really frustrated, because there was plenty of media at that point in time that portrayed God as something other than a white guy. I think we'd already had Bruce Almighty at that point, for a really mainstream version of that with a black man as God. We definitely had Dogma by then, and you cannot tell me that the Supernatural team hasn't seen Dogma. I reject that idea
That's
entirely.
impossible. That's
Like,
completely impossible. Yeah, of course they have.
given that they have
Leave it to
a
the Catholics to end existence.
exactly given that they have an archangel going by the name Loki. Like, come on, come on. Yeah, like, so we've had Alanis Morissette as God. We have songs about that use female pronouns for God. There was nothing stopping them from having God be something other than a mediocre white man. But
Except their little walnut brains.
except their little walnut brains, so smooth. I know that that's the opposite of what you just said about walnuts, but
Keep it. We're gonna keep it in. Um, well, and I think also the other problem with, like, so God being a mediocre white guy in a cast in a cast that is diverse and that reflects America,
could be
um,
interesting.
could be
Yeah,
super interesting because
make
then that's like
has
some
some
commentary,
commentary. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But God is a mediocre white guy, it seems, specifically so that they can talk some more about how the boys feel about their own father and
Mhm.
absentee dads of absentee mediocre white guy dads of white guys.
Yep.
Just that we can have that in there. And
Yep.
thank
I
you.
forgive
I
you. I was
But how
really
about when I
rooting.
forgave my father? No, yes, no,
Yeah.
that's so true. Everyone go watch Hamlet 2. There are some parts of it that really don't hold up, but other
Nope.
parts of it that do.
I really do. Yeah.
That really
Yes.
do. And the less of it didn't hold up than I would have expected, given that it came out in like 2006. Is that when
Yeah.
it came
Yeah.
out?
It's yes. Totally.
So
Um.
2006, it came out when Supernatural did.
No, exactly. Yes, and that was a movie that was like, ooh, let's talk about specifically, like, anti-Latino racism.
Which is great. Thank you. Thank you for giving us one.
That's
And
not
for
some. I mean, you still don't get a lot of that, like, in modern movies.
no,
Anyway,
there was a day without a Mexican, but apparently only Latinas had heard of it.
I've never heard of that one. Sorry.
Okay, all right, okay, well, we gotta try and find it and watch it.
All right, good deal. Good deal.
But,
Um,
right,
yeah,
so
yeah. Uh, but yes, it's
God's a
all
mediocre white guy,
God's a mediocre white guy. Choices all ultimately revolve around the Winchesters. I mean, I don't know, like, I just that's what it is. I don't even know how to
right,
like spin that out into
Right.
15 minutes of talking. It's just like, that's what it is.
It plays out in so many ways and in so many episodes. Like, it plays out in so many forms that it's almost impossible to, like, it's the oxygen of the
Yeah.
world. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to find, like, necessarily specific points. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring up one and maybe start talking about another one that came to mind. This is also cribbed from our other conversations about
Sure,
this.
yeah.
And maybe more will arise.
Yes.
But so you might think, okay, but biblical prophecy, but like there are other gods and stuff in
Oh,
supernatural.
right.
They actually mention other gods,
Yes.
but
Yes.
those gods are mentioned explicitly. Well, not explicitly, like in the sense that like it's not in the script. The
Mm-hmm.
script is trying to say the opposite, but in terms of the narrative events that happen, the gods come up specifically so that they can be explained away. So
Yes.
there's the something of the gods. Is it the Twilight of the Gods? Is that the episode?
That sounds
Or
right. Yeah.
Hammer of the Gods, I think is actually what it's called. I think
Oh,
it's
okay.
Hammer of the Gods, but it should be Twilight of the Gods because that's really what's going on.
Yes.
Where we meet all these different gods who are having this like they're basically now
There
again,
it's stolen from American gods.
it is stolen from American gods so hardcore.
They
But
go to a hotel in the middle of the country to
they
meet
go
up
to
with
a
all the
yeah.
other gods.
Yes, it is stolen from American Gods, but it was good in American Gods and it's good here
Yes.
because it's just cool. Like you
Yeah,
throw
yeah.
it's all these wacky characters in a
Mm,
room from the archetypes of human religion.
you get to do some
Um,
fun. You get to do some fun like Easter egg jokes about
what
like
you're the god of, and so like
yeah,
you have a quirk or you have a thing, or like you're
yeah,
like, oh, don't mention Holly to me, and you're like,
right.
you died.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like stuff like that. Um, we meet Kali, obviously a badass woman of color. This is wild. Had I ever seen like a cool South Asian woman outside of a Bollywood film at that time, like getting to be awesome? I don't know that I had.
Right,
Um,
right.
and maybe this is my problem, and there were these things all over the place. I didn't see them, but I think that it's
Was
fair to say that this was
not exactly thick on the ground in American media.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like again, distribution issues. So there were like a lot of cool movies that were coming out. Like I mean there was a cool like Chinese American lesbians movie that came out. It was made in like 2010 or something like that, and there were all these cool like lesbian Indian movies. These are dramas, right? Like so
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
so they're not like fantasy. They don't have the horror element if that's what you're going for. They're not demon slayers,
Right.
but like
Right.
but there are all these things out there that are not what you would that are not Bollywood basically, and they're not like martial arts films.
Mhm.
So they they're a little bit outside of what the mainstream that we saw at that time was.
Yeah.
And again, I have to assume because of distribution
Mhm.
issues, because these are indie films.
Mhm.
These movies
Yeah.
didn't make it into my consciousness until a couple of years ago.
Right.
So Kali, she's great. She has this amazing line as the gods all sit down to be like, what the Christians are fucking up everything, man.
Yeah,
Like,
yes.
why do you think you should be in charge? And I was like, this is great. Let's have this conversation.
Yep.
And the Winchesters are there, of course, but like, okay, fine. You always get a proxy human character into the world of the
Sure.
gods, or
Sure.
a half human character.
I, okay, I'll come back to this when
Okay.
you finish your thought. Yeah.
Okay. But like so Kali gets this, I think the Lucifer guy, he's possessing a dude at this point, and he shows up. Of course he does.
That one actor that you've seen in everything. Yeah.
That one actor you've seen everything shows up and he fucks everything up. But right before that, Kali gets this amazing speech where she like I think she has like 4 arms now, or extra arms, and she's wreathed in flame, and she says that she's the goddess of death and rebirth. I mean, not exactly. I think it might just be death. Anyway, that is what this actress is saying.
I was gonna say, like, we can talk about what it actually is, but that's probably not what got said in the show. But
no, but it was still not bad.
Yeah.
And I have X many billion worshipers, so if anybody is going to end the world, it's going to be me. Whoa, amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And then she has to run away because she can't deal with the fucking devil. Like, and the Winchester brothers have to drag her away, and then she never shows up again ever for any reason.
I think she gets killed.
Does she get killed?
I'm gonna look that up really quickly because that's what I
Oh Lord God.
Supernatural Kali. Um
I hate that I have this, like, I just took a shower, so there's this, like, spot on my
Oh
bodysuit
no!
that's like braid water.
Yep, yep. Been there, done that. Oh, no, you're right. He kills all the gods except Lucifer kills all the gods except Kali, who is able to get off a single attack on Lucifer, which did little to no damage to the archangel. On Gabriel's urging, she escaped with Sam and Dean while Gabriel confronted Lucifer. Okay, so I misremembered. Uh but I
I'll
did
remember forever.
yeah, yes. Uh, yeah. Uh, Taking Gabriel to the other gods, she kills him to show the remaining gods that with an archangel blade, the gods can ultimately kill Lucifer. Unknown to her, however, Gabriel's blade was a fake. Mercury would betray the rest of the gods and sell them out to Lucifer. God damn it, I hate this. I hate this
Right.
so much.
Right. So
What I
right.
what I
So
remember is Sam and Dean being like, just because they're gods doesn't mean they're not monsters, basically. Um, like, and going back to the thing before about like, everything is like, even angels are ultimately monsters, and if it's a monster it's ultimately irredeemable, like Kali is a god of death and human sacrifice, and I'm pretty sure in the Winchester's eyes that makes her, and I might, maybe I'm conflating some like fandom stuff with what actually happened in the show because I haven't seen this episode. But this idea of like, they do kill pagan gods sometimes. There's that weird Christmas episode
there's
where,
a weird Christmas episode. There's the one where they kill Paris Hilton, I believe.
yes, yeah, and like, just because they don't care that something is a god. They only care that it hurts humans.
Right.
And that's the only like defining line for them. So even if they don't kill Kali in this episode, I don't have any doubt that the show would write an episode in which they would kill Kali. That is a straw man. That's a
One
scarecrow.
one thing that I think, this is what's really interesting to me. That is a scarecrow. So I think so all the gods, other gods of other cosmologies are brought in. Kali is explicitly given lines that are like, oh yeah, she is very powerful. She does have a lot of worshipers.
Right,
It's
currently. She is
actually
a current god.
she's a current god. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, there's a lot of Americans and stuff who believe in Lucifer, but I don't know how many there actually even are. I mean, it's not that that's necessarily even, they're not stating just because it's stolen from American gods, they're not saying that necessarily having believers is what makes you powerful.
Right, right.
But still, it's like, well, what, we haven't answered what does make you powerful necessarily, and we really, I don't think ever do. Like, it's sort of as you would expect of white guy cosmology, I think it's presented as being innate and not something that actually needs to be talked about.
Right.
Just like white supremacy.
Just like white
If
supremacy.
you got it, you got it.
Right.
I mean, you can't get it.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's that, and they are brought in for it to be demonstrated, like,
Yeah, they're
why we
highlighted.
don't need to think about them ever again.
Yes. Yeah. They're brought in, they're badass, but only to prove that our villain is even more badass than that. Our heroes are even more badass than that because they're the ones who are going to ultimately, we all know that our heroes are going to defeat the villain. Like, this is something I think that,
Some of you may die.
yeah, but I mean, I think this is a problem that Supernatural maybe realized but didn't ever really fix, which is that if you can, and I think actually, okay, so this is the thing, right? They do things like they kill John Winchester in season 2. near the top of season 2, and that's very emotionally affecting because we spent all of season 1 trying to find him, and then he sacrifices himself, and it's a big deal. Which one of them dies at the end of season 2?
Sam.
Sam. Yes. Yeah, and then Dean makes a deal with the Crossroads demon to bring him back. And
Yep.
then okay, yes, I'm just like
Yes, yes, yes.
like Will Gramming this, like going back into my mind palace. Okay, so he makes a deal with the Crossroads demon, and then in season 3, the deal is ticking down, and then he gets taken by hellhounds at the end of season 3, and then in
Yes.
season 4, Castiel gripped him
Meet
tight and raised
Castiel.
him from perdition. Okay,
Hell yeah, he did.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Um,
What was he doing down there?
Castiel?
Yeah.
He was there to save Dean.
But who told him to save Dean?
That I don't know. I think that
If
I feel like the whole point has always been that Castiel is like kind of a rogue agent.
Sure. Does that mean that he just like peers over hell and is like, are there any good ones in the stew today? Ooh.
Look at that pillow lips.
Exactly.
Uh, sorry.
That guy.
I don't know what
Also,
that
like,
is,
I feel
but
like
I'm
for the
gonna grip
record,
it.
I feel like in the spirit of full disclosure, I should just say that like I'm a
Mhm.
filthy multi-shipper and like
Yeah.
I think that Dean and Castiel have a really great relationship. And that I wish they would have just gone there.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that
But
it's
also I could have seen Dean with a lot of people and Sam with a lot of people, and
sure.
it would have been fine. And I would have loved it if for no other reason than it would have showed growth beyond the family unit in terms of
Right.
who you can be emotionally vulnerable with.
This is so I'm gonna jump over to that real quick. This is something that I've seen fans talking about, is that one of the betrayals of the end of this series is, and you can say that it's about the COVID restrictions and all that, but one of the things that got really hammered home over the later seasons was Bobby's line, "Family don't end with blood." Like the point that like the Winchesters had a family that had a found family, and we love a found family trope. But that they had sort of the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb kind of thing. Like, yeah, the brothers were important, but there was this they had built a network of, even a small one, of people that they loved and supported and who were family even though they weren't technically related in any way. And then despite that, at the end of the series, the only connection that truly matters to Sam after Dean dies appears to be Dean still. We like he's having this relationship, he's hanging out with his son who is named Dean, clearly because it's written on his cute little coveralls when he's a toddler. He has a blurry blonde background wife. And the most emotional moment of that ending montage of Sam is old man Sam in his terrible wig coming in and sitting down inside the Impala and stroking and like being like, like I'm back with my brother, and my Wincesty like vibes that I got off of that notwithstanding, the the end connection.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to Wincest, but like I like
I
certainly
sure, I
I
get
certainly
it.
read some back in the days. And like I get
Sure.
it. And the reason that we get it is because like they do shit like that.
Right, exactly. So like all of this ink and celluloid and digital screen time gets spent on the idea that family goes beyond blood, and yet Sam's happily ever after is this sort of sad, hollow. I don't know. Maybe it's not hollow. I don't know. But it feels hollow to me watching it, that he is, he's got everything that Stanford Sam ever could have wanted. He's got a blonde wife. God, that also made, I'm just like, of fucking course she's blonde. Of course you couldn't even get away from this long enough to not give him a Jessica Mary Winchester like background wife. Get fucked.
I love you, blurry wife,
I
mom.
love you, blurry wife, mom. um, ultimately the only connection that matters is between these two brothers. Dean dies in a barn alone with his brother.
Nope, he dies rapidly of tetanus.
Yes. Like, and that's really frustrating. It really, that's just another football pull of, like, there's this whole thematic thing that you've been building towards for 15 years, and you're like, but not really. Um, uh, Makes me so mad. Um, yeah, and again, like, they say that they couldn't do everything that they wanted to do because of COVID restrictions. Um, but they never invited Samantha Ferris or any of the other Roadhouse crew to be in the final episode at all. And they brought back randos from season 1. Like, okay, what? Anyway, I forgot what my other point was.
We started talking about I had talked about emotional vulnerability, like that I'm a multi-shipper. I felt
Oh,
like
Dean and Cass. Oh, right. Oh, right. Okay, yes. Circling back. I was reconstructing seasons 1 through 4. And trying to figure out who died when. So, I think that the show figured out relatively early on that there were only so many times that they could kill Sam and Dean and bring them back before that started to lose emotional resonance, and
the
it
answer is
started to
117.
because it started to have the comic book feeling of, like, your fave dies, but you know that it's not gonna last. There's gonna be, and in comics, maybe it's gonna be a reboot, there's gonna be a new book, whatever. But, like, but in Supernatural, it was somebody's gonna make a deal with something, and there's gonna be a Deus Ex Machina, and they're gonna come back. So when you can no longer kill your leads for emotional stakes raising, you have to start killing the people around them. And that's how we end up with, 100. Is it actually 172 dead women, or did you pull that number out of somewhere?
So here's how I got that number.
Yes.
The meta that OC, please stop. Sorry. The meta that was was like, you guys, more men die on Supernatural than women, and then everybody in the comments very politely being like, did you look at how many female actors there ever were on set compared to male actors? And they were like, no, we didn't. That's fine. They did a lot of work.
Sure.
Like, it was, but this.
Right. So the question is, like, proportionally, how many? Because if you hire 100 female actors and 90 of them die, and you hire 200 male actors and 150 of them die, still more women proportionally have died than men.
Right, exactly. And then we also
And you still have more men left over at the end.
Right, exactly. So but that number, the number of women who had died, this was in, like, about 2011.
Okay.
And so the number of women who had died was 86.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, over the past 10 years, let's just say, and I think that's pretty generous, because that's assuming that they got so much better. And 50, like, that 1/3 of the show's runtime made up half of its female deaths. So I just said 172.
Okay.
I just doubled it.
Cool.
Which I think was very generous of me.
Yes. Rather than tripling it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I was just like, you know what? But even then, that's like that urge to charity. I'm like, you know what? I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say that it was as bad. One thing I will say is that something I note is that I think, goddamn, I'm going to murder this dog.
Oh no.
He just went outside.
Yeah.
He just went outside.
I do. I was not there, but
okay. So I think that this is the other part of it. Is like they knew on some level that with their particular audience, they knew this, because otherwise I don't know how you explain Cassie, Missouri, and Collie.
Right.
They knew that they couldn't kill women of color
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
screen.
Yes. Highly
They
melanated women.
Yes, they knew that they could not do that. That was something that they didn't talk about it.
Mhm.
But the fact that those three women are alive, albeit just safely off screen, Missouri came back for like a thing.
Mhm.
Um, that also I think is a kind of death.
Mhm.
Because for the audience, it's like, well, then their stories are over. We don't.
Yep.
Sure, they didn't die, so you don't get that extra slap in the face, and maybe you don't have to deal with sexualization or like in death and like rape and then death, or like all of these things that are kind of unique to women, however you
Mhm.
know to women and AFAB folks
Yeah.
uh in media. But you still have the problem, which is the lack of story, the lack of narrative weight, the lack of agency, the lack of even something that you could misinterpret as agency, because they just
Mhm.
aren't there.
Right. Right. Yep.
And I
Yeah.
think the other thing about agency in Supernatural and the white guy cosmology of it all is that apart from all of this story stuff, there's also like all this negative space, which is
Mhm.
basically that, like,
I'm sorry. What a ridiculous noise. Eva, you make some very ridiculous noises too. You do.
okay, I'm gonna try and get through, and then I guess we might have to
We might
add
have to, yeah, we might have to come back to this another
we might
time,
have to
but
come back to this. All right, part one. But I will
yeah.
say that that the stuff there's a lot of stuff that you Osito, come here, buddy. Come here. There's a lot of stuff that you don't see. And it's basically like, anytime that you don't see characters on Supernatural who aren't the boys, you can assume they have not been doing anything consequential while they're gone.
Pretty
Like,
much.
Bobby hasn't been doing anything. Like when the Roadhouse burns down, but before the Harvells die, refresh my memory. But like, again, they don't like try to build a new business, do they? Or do they? But it just isn't that important,
No.
because I don't think that it like that they.
No. I mean, Ash dies in the
Yes.
Roadhouse fire, or is killed and left there. Ellen escapes. They don't know that initially, so she shows up and it's a big dramatic thing. I don't remember how, Joe is off, like, living the hunter lifestyle in defiance of her mother's wishes at that point, I think. Yeah, and I get the sense that Ellen just sort of, joins the like, also becomes kind of a nomad the way the Winchesters are. I like, characters will, if it's needed for the narrative, they'll do stuff off screen like research, or they've been out working their contacts and working the hunter network. But, like, have they done anything terribly interesting? Probably not. And even if they did do something interesting, why do we care? It wasn't on screen.
Right. So I think then that my point stands is like,
Yeah.
I mean, Ellen had the Roadhouse. That was something that she made. It was a result of choices she made. It was presumably something that was important to her. It served a narrative function as a hub, which meant that her choice was narratively important, like, more or less. And then
Yeah.
as soon as it's gone, like, without the Winchesters to impel change in people, they do not change. Nothing in
Mhm.
their lives, like, and so whatever momentum is there, like, unless the Winchesters, because the Winchesters, I mean, this is negative space, so this is a theory just based on stuff that didn't happen.
Sure.
But because the Winchesters didn't tell Ellen to rebuild the Roadhouse, she does not rebuild it.
Mhm.
Because they don't tell her to set up someplace different, she doesn't set up someplace different.
Right.
Like, so this whole thing that was central to her character is just gone.
Mhm. Mhm. Yay! Feminism.
Yay, feminism.
That's what I was gonna say earlier, is that, like, it's kind of related to the self-perpetuating problems of systemic, like, casting and so forth. Is that if you can no longer kill your leads, um for emotional stakes, you cast cool women because you want to. And I think that this is something that plays out in a lot of different arenas. Is you bring in cool women and queer people and people of color and intersections thereof, and everybody is like, that person is so cool. I'm very invested in this. And then in Supernatural, now you have characters that the audience is invested in, and you need emotional stakes for your end of season. So, and you can't kill Sam and Dean anymore because that doesn't do anything. So, you're gonna have to kill the women that you brought in. And this is, we've talked before about how the women's work fan vid to Violet by Hole was kind of life changing for both of us, and kind of like was really a light bulb moment for me. Um, I think that this was one of those arguments that I kept trying to make, which was obviously these women are important because, like, the narrative is giving them weight, because if they didn't have weight, it wouldn't matter when they died, right? So isn't that feminist? Isn't it empowering to have these women on screen who are so important that it is devastating when they die? But and then I had to sort of reckon with this counter argument of, okay, but their only weight is to propel the Winchesters impel change. Like, the Winchesters are the only weight in the universe. Everything rolls towards them. So if other characters are going to change, it is as a result of the weight that they are putting in the universe. And if other characters do something, it only matters insofar as it has an effect on the Winchesters. The death of a woman is only significant insofar as it has an impact on the Winchesters, positive or negative. Like, Lilith dying has a positive impact on the Winchesters because it means that Armageddon doesn't happen. Yay! But it
Although, isn't it the thing where like actually her dying is the thing that opens the
it
seal?
is. Yeah, I think you're
Just
right.
checking, just checking, just checking.
What do I know?
Remember for whatever reason there were 666 seals, but she only had to break 66.
Yeah, like the key 66. I don't know. I don't know.
Just
I
anyway, but yeah,
Anyway, yeah. Yeah, and then I had to, yeah, and reckoning with that really made me reckon with a lot of like, oh, yeah, why should women only exist to like have effects on dudes? What if I want more of their story? Like,
right.
then what?
Right. And then it's like, oh, you get another, and like it's like, okay. And like, even then, like I'm saying, like when this they'll bring on another woman, but then it's like, great, well, she gets what, like a maximum like 10 episode arc. That's being generous.
Yeah.
And then she's gone forever. And meanwhile, they've had, hundreds of episodes. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm never gonna get the same amount. Like you keep bringing in new women, but I'm never gonna like get the same kind of story, the same kind of rambling, road trippy, monster of the weeky, etc. kind of
Yeah.
story. I guess they had Wayward Sister. I don't know whatever happened with that.
I think maybe there was a pilot and I don't think it ever went anywhere.
Shucks. Go fucking
Shucks.
figure.
Um,
Um,
I think that it I think that one of the most damning things about Supernatural is that at the end of 15 seasons, even as someone who had stopped watching the show, um, I couldn't avoid hearing about it. I'm in fandom, um, and I could not think. I did not know of any women who would theoretically be there at the end of the show. Like, Charlie was the most recent one, and she died in like season 11, I think.
okay, well, yeah, why always back.
So a ways, yeah, like a little while ago. Um, so I never heard about other women who came in and were part of the recurring cast. Like, there were the Harvells, and there was Charlie, and
Mrs. Tran.
Mrs.
That's all I
Trans. Yeah. Yeah. And they're all dead.
Yeah.
And I had no reason to think that there would be any women involved in the finale. There weren't any. There weren't any women significant enough to the plot at the end that the producers said, in spite of COVID, we have to have this person here.
Right.
Yikes.
Right. Yikes. No, a big yikes. And I think, before we break for
Yes.
part 2, before we break for maybe I mean, he's not crying right now, but I don't
Yeah, yeah. My brain's starting to be like,
my brain's starting to fizz. But I
Yeah.
think, the last thing that I would note is that, one thing that came up in doing research for that poem were all of these arguments about, like, oh, well, I mean, but let's be fair, like, let's be realistic. This is a show that's about men, and it's a horror fantasy, like, so people are gonna die, like, if you want all of your gay faves to be happy together, like, can I show you to Sense8? Like you don't, or whatever. I don't think
Yeah.
that's necessarily even fair, but, like, because I don't think that it's like a gay utopia there either, but like,
I mean, I love Sense8.
I lost my flip-flop.
I lost my flip-flop.
But if you want a place, a cool, diverse, like, fun fantasy time, like, this is not going to be the show for that. But I think, the thing that kind of sticking in my head is, like, Supernatural is a horror fantasy show that has gone 15 years with no final girls.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And on that note,
And I guess we're going to have to leave it there.
I'm Anthea.
And I'm Elisa.
And this has been a very special episode of
Monster
Monster Girls.
That was actually not bad. I think
Pretty
that was
good, given the lag. Yeah.
yes. Up, up, by